Welcome on to this edition of the Faster Beyond 50 podcast. Today, we're talking about whether or not running marathons bad for your heart. We're going to talk about bouncing back after COVID, why to do strength training, the correct way to train when using the MAF method, and balancing your triathlon training as you get older. My name is Brad Nadalt. We've got the Coach Lindsay Parry with us. Lindsay, nice to touch base once again. I love these Q&A episodes. So many great topics to dive into today. But before we get into the first one, you well? I know you've been struggling with a bit of a dodgy hamstring. How's it feeling?
I've started training again. It feels good. I very much practice what I preach, and I started with strength training first. Got 2 really good sessions under the belt, then a run, and it all felt pretty good. I'm just so out of practice now with running that the 2 runs that I've done, I haven't stopped my stopwatch. So if anyone has a look at what I've done on Strava, I'm not walking. I just didn't stop my watch.
That's the worst, is when you do that, you forget to stop your watch, and then all of a sudden you're getting all these segments on Strava that you shouldn't have because it's in your car on the way home.
Oh, thank goodness that didn't happen. Yeah.
Which is a bit of a problem. All right, cool. First question comes in today from Troy Jensen. And if you have a question, by the way, what you can do is click on the link in the description of this podcast on whatever audio player you're listening on, or if you're watching on YouTube, it is in the description. You can click on that. We do love video questions, just so you know. We love to see and hear you, so please do pop those. You can also submit them written, but we do filter the video questions to the top. All right, great first question in from Troy Jensen. Lindsay, Troy says, I've not been myself since having COVID. It took me about 3 months to not feel like I needed a nap after a 3-mile walk. Now, 8 months after the infection, I seem to be a minute per mile slower than before. Furthermore, I'm getting injured at a fairly higher rate. He says, I'd love to finish off my ultra career next summer with a 100-miler. He's going to be 60. What a great goal that is. He says, but I'm not sure I can get it together to do all the training. He's just had to give up on an early marathon due to an Achilles problem. He says, any advice? Thanks a lot, Troy Jensen. Lindsay, Troy has had a bit of a rough run of it. What advice can you give him?
Yeah, so Troy, in many ways, this is the kind of trap that beginners fall into. And one of the issues with long COVID and having walked this road myself, you kind of end up back as a beginner. And because you are scratching 60, unfortunately, it's like multiply. So because you haven't been able to use it, you lose it. So in other words, you've lost a ton of strength over this period that you've been sick. And there's, some cardiovascular changes that have taken place. There's some physical changes that are taking place. And even though you recognize that you are slower, the wording that you use, I'm only capable of, that makes me feel like you are striving for faster, but that's all that you can get to, okay? And the best way to get yourself to this 100-miler, and it is possible, is to actually let go. So don't even worry about what the pace is that you run at. So I would recommend for you until 16 weeks before the marathon or the ultra training, 16 weeks before the ultra, when the ultra training starts, up until that point, I would recommend MAF training. MAF training is really good in this particular scenario because it makes sure that you are training at an intensity that is at no risk to you. So even if there's any lingering COVID still in the system, now you're training at a level that is at no risk to you. It shouldn't leave you tired. But what you will see is a sudden improvement. So what's very different to COVID and normal MAF return is in a normal MAF return, the increments tend to be so slow that we don't really notice them until we realize 3 or 4 weeks down the drag, hang on, I'm 15 to 20 seconds per mile faster than I was. So they're slow, but they're there. The improvement when running with MAF, when you've had COVID, and I've seen this happen multiple times with multiple athletes, is that you'll go along and feel like it's not working, and then suddenly you kind of back to where you were. So it's really sudden when that happens. But by training this way, low risk yourself, you're not going to be feeling all that fatigue. And very importantly, you're not going to pick up those injuries. And you can start doing the strength training and do it properly so that when we get to that point 16 weeks out from that ultra marathon, you've also really strengthened your body so that when we need to pick up the training to the ultra training, your body can handle the training. And then the final thing that you want to do now during this period, and potentially also while we are preparing for that 100 miler, is that you may need to incorporate some more cross training than you are used to. So we could still prepare you pretty well for a 100 miler, for example, if we did 3 runs that were spread out across the week a little bit more, and then added in 1 to 2 cycles plus your strength training. You could still prepare really well for a 100 miler, and that would also obviously really bring down that risk of picking up the musculoskeletal injuries. But if we do all the things properly until that point, that final step may not be necessary.
Gee, I struggle to wrap my head around 100 miles. Troy, that is phenomenal. I did a few years ago, and Lindsay can attest to this. I did a few years ago decide that I wanted to run a 100 miler. There's a pretty famous one here in South Africa, and Lindsay and I were doing a whole bunch of talks, physical talks around the country, and we ended up driving from the one city to the next city, and it was along the route of this 100 miler. And I was quite bullish before we did that drive, and then I saw the route, and straight after that, I was like, you know what? I don't want to do that anymore. That was a stupid idea. So, yeah, Troy, best of luck. Let us know how you go. Next question from Ron. Ron says, as a 70-year-old runner, I'm having trouble figuring out the best days to do my strength training. I run every other day. On the days I don't run, I walk or I do the elliptical trainer. I've read that you should do strength training on days you run, so that you get you shouldn't do strength training on the days you run, so you get a full recovery day between. But I often don't have enough time, or I'm too tired to add the strength training after a run. However, I feel like I'm not getting the most out of my recovery when I do strength training on the days I'm not running. Secondly, how intense does the strength training need to be? I do most body weight work, adding either dumbbells or kettlebells, and it usually involves 5 or 6 exercises, 2 sets with 15 reps. I do not use heavy weights, usually 15 to 20 except for kettlebell swings, 50 pounds, and tire flips, 180 pounds. My long run once a week is about 7 miles at an easy pace based on heart rate, and my other runs 3 to 5 miles with at least one day at a faster pace. Generally, training-wise, that looks pretty good, but what advice can you give Ron with regards to where to fit that strength training in so he doesn't feel so gassed?
Yeah, so as always, I'm going to start with the general advice, Ron, and then I'll just be a little bit more specific to you. So as a general rule, I still prefer a 4-day running week with 2 to 3 days of strength, and then 1 day of no exercise. So in that week, what would that look like? It would be something along the lines of Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday as the runs. So something along those lines. And then on 2 of the days, I would have the strength training. So if in a Tuesday, Thursday scenario, I do strength training on Monday, Wednesday, and then potentially another strength training session either on the Thursday or the Saturday, just depending on how the week is working out, what people are training for, etc. In that scenario, I typically have Monday as a slightly easier strength session. So it'll focus a little bit more on mobility and a little bit more on stability, still doing some prime movers and working. So I can still feel like I'm doing a workout, but that's not a workout I want to feel like really hammered after. Then Tuesday is typically my harder day of running, which is also why I don't want to work too hard on a Monday in the strength. Then Wednesday is the day that I hammer myself in the gym, followed by my easiest run of the week, and then another fairly easy strength session on the Thursday if I'm going to do a third one in the week. And then obviously long runs are centered around the weekend when there's generally a bit more time flexibility, not necessarily more time, but just more time flexibility around when I can run. So that for me is a good general look of how to do things. So just listening to a couple of your examples of the exercises that you're doing, although you are doing mostly body weight, you've got a pretty tough routine, which is cool. Once a week, I would push myself in that routine. And once a week, I'd maybe leave out some of the hardest of the exercises, the tire flips, for example. I might, or perhaps do those as a separate exercise much later in the week. But the day before you're going to do a harder run, just tone down that strength training a little bit. Once a week, really drive yourself hard on that strength training. It does work if you do your strength training on easier run days. It absolutely does work. And then you're right, it does give you a little bit of recovery time. Just got to be a little bit careful about where that is in relation to your higher intensity run. So you just really don't want to do hard or fast running the day after you've done hard strength training. In fact, I'd argue 2 days. So I would want 3 days that go between doing hard strength training and the high intensity. And I can again just use myself as a perfect example. I did a lot of strength training in 2024. And then as we were getting into the December holidays, and I both thought I'm probably not going to be as consistent as I would like to be with strength training, number one. Number two, I felt like I was really getting strong. So I really hammered myself in the gym on a Monday, speed work on a Tuesday. The following week, hammered myself in the gym, speed work on Tuesday. My hamstring went. So you can definitely overdo it and compromise your recovery. So going forward, I'll just stick to what's always worked, working on the small, intricate muscles moderately. So I'm definitely not just going through the motions. I can feel that I'm doing something, but Monday session, I don't finish Monday session needing to just lie there for a bit before I stretch, gathering myself. That's how I feel on Wednesday.
All right, great question, Ron. Thank you very much for that. Lindsay, next question in, and it's funny you mentioned MAF in the answer to the first one, but we do have a MAF question, and this is from Louise Ambler. Louise is in Scotland. Louise said, "Hi, I'm about to start a MAF training plan, and I have some questions. On the training schedule on the Coach Parry platform, the MAF calculation is listed as 190 minus age. Louise is 67, which obviously then equates to a 123. However, MAF calculator gives the results of 180 minus her age, which is 67. As I said, which goes down to 113. Which one is correct? Should I aim to stay between the range of 113 and 123 or 103 and 113 for the entire run? Do these numbers still apply to trail running? And if I encounter a short uphill and my heart rate temporarily goes higher, is that okay as long as it comes back down quickly? Similarly, if I'm running downhill, should I increase my pace to keep my heart rate within that range? I'm a strong downhill runner, so this wouldn't be an issue."
Yeah, so let's just address the calculation. So although strictly speaking 190 minus heart rate isn't MAF is 180 minus heart rate, we still call it MAF because we have to acknowledge the fact that we didn't develop this on our own. This is a method that was developed by Dr. Phil Maffetone that I came across many years ago and that I've used very successful in a rehabilitative context, like bringing people back after long injury layoffs, serious injury layoffs, after operations, after serious illnesses. So it's something that I've seen work, that I believe in, and that we incorporate as part of our bucket of training options that we've got available at Coach Parry. However, once we moved into this space of the 50 plus, I wasn't getting the same results with MAF that I had been getting previously. And once I had done MAF long enough and seen that, okay, it's not working the way that I would like to work, but I'm happy that the clients that I'm working with have been running long enough for me to do a time trial and then to calculate an actual threshold for them and then to pop in the numbers based on their threshold, I started to see movement straight away. Effectively, the principles of MAF kicked in straight away. And what that made me realize is that there just wasn't enough stimulation at 180 minus age. And so I started to add 10 experimentally and have a look, and boom, that's where it started to work in exactly the same way that I experienced it in the general population with older runners. So that's why in the FBF and the She Runs Fast platforms, we use the 190 minus age because it's still well below threshold, because that's really the point of math. Math is a fairly arbitrary number that ensures that we are training well below threshold. And at 190 minus age, we are still well below threshold, but we're getting enough of an aerobic stimulus that we start to see that really nice change. Okay, so that answers part one of your question, is that use 190 minus age, because that's going to give you the right stimulus that you need for getting that goal. So Brandon, just remind me part two of that question.
Part two was that, does that range apply on trail running as well? Like if you're running trails, do you need to keep it the same?
Yeah. And it does, because the physiology is the physiology. It's this method of training is protecting us physically on the one hand, but very importantly, it is developing the right physiology for helping us to achieve our goals in long distance running. Okay, so running that is done at slower than threshold pace. So you do need to take note of it. What that often means on trails is that there's much more walking when you do this method on trails, and honestly, that is okay. A lot of the very vertical stuff, you'd probably be walking anyway. You can't run it. So it does depend a little bit on what the trails are like. But I normally set myself in training runs, when we're doing the actual math test, it really does need to be strict. But on training runs, I'll allow myself a 5-beat grace. So if I go 5 beats over on a very tough section, I'll be okay with that. But as soon as I get to 5 beats over, I walk. And then I walk until I get right to the lower end of the math. And then I'll try running again. And I'll try running a bit slower than I was running before to see if I can take even longer to get to that 5 beats over. But you do need, if you're training to math, we are training the physiology. And so therefore you do need to run 2 heart rates. And on trails, it just means more walking, but you are still developing aerobically. So it is fine to run on trails.
Yeah, that was the second part of the question, was the trails, but then the third part was about uphills, which is the same principle applies on uphills, whether it's road or trail.
Exactly.
And then Louise was asking about running downhill. Can she speed up a little bit on the downhills, because she is a good downhill runner? And
you will speed up. So on the downhills, you will see that your heart rate will probably drop below the 119. So strictly speaking, you should be speeding up, but we don't want you tearing down the other side. Because that's a very high eccentric risk and can then lead to other types of injuries. But you absolutely will speed up going downhill, yes.
Thank you for that question, Louise. Next question is from Jacob Swanson in Boulder, Colorado. Jacob says, I'm 62-year-old triathlete training for an upcoming half Ironman. I'm currently doing multiple sessions per week, including 3 swims, 3 cycles, and 4 runs, and some strength training. Lately, I've been feeling completely drained and struggling to recover from my sessions or between sessions. How do I balance my training to avoid burnout while still building the endurance and strength I need for race day? Should I be adjusting my training plan or incorporating more recovery strategies at my age? If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsay and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, so the answer to that is both. I mean, I'm continuously flabbergasted is the only word I can use at how close triathletes train to elites. It's like it's the one sport in the world, no matter what age, no matter what the ability, no matter how competitive or not, people just train so close to what the elites train in terms of total volume and certainly number of sessions. So you're just doing too much, and your body is telling you that. Again, at as we get older, I would argue that the strength training is the one that we shouldn't compromise on. And that means that we do have to compromise on some of the others. So really, when I'm looking at triathlon and helping people to assess how many sessions they should do, what they should focus on, we start with the age-old, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And then I always look at the swim and I go, right, how competitive is this athlete and what are they going to get out of the swim? Okay, so and the longer the triathlon gets, the more true this is that the swim, relatively forms the smallest part of the whole race in terms of time. Okay. So that's the first thing that tells me the swim is like, it's really in many ways the least important. And the less competitive you are, the less important the swim becomes. Okay. Now, and then I go to the next step and I go, right, how much do you want to improve overall? So I've got the strengths and weaknesses in the background. I've got like, how much do you want to improve overall? And how much can you realistically improve in the swim? And 9 out of 10 times, what comes out of that is that I will cut down the swim to 1 to 2 sessions per week, depending on a couple of other factors. And maybe once this week, twice next week, once the week off, whatever. But so the swim, people almost always doing too much swimming, because to improve your swim by 5 minutes takes an unbelievable amount of swim training and dedication. To improve your run 5 minutes just takes a little bit of nutrition and a better race strategy. So you can get those 5 minutes just by racing more sensibly. Plus, you can easily add another 5 minutes onto the run through training, and maybe even another 5 minutes. So it makes, and the bike is even more so, because a lot of people don't come from a cycling background. So on the bike, we can sometimes find people 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Okay. So that's kind of how I take my view, is to go, right, where are the weaknesses? Is this someone who's going to struggle to finish the swim? Because if it is, okay, we have to work on the swim, but then that means we have to give somewhere else. And then the running and the cycling have a really good cross-pollination in terms of fitness. So we can play with the running and the cycling all the way through, topping one up. But again, typically I would do 2 to 3 cycles in a week and 3 to maximum 4 runs in a week. So that is kind of how I would start to fiddle with it, but I absolutely would create more recovery time. One hard bike, one hard run maximum in the week. Obviously a longer run and a longer cycle. But again, I'll often, because the two cross-pollinate, I don't necessarily have a long cycle every single weekend. We might do like a long bike this weekend and then maybe an hour 15 run. Then next week we maybe will do an hour and a half to a 2 hour bike, but we'll do a 2 hour run. So that's kind of another way that you can just mix up the so that your total volume comes down, but you're still taking care of all the elements that you need to be a better triathlete. And then the one session that I very seldom use outside of elite athletes is the brick session. So I feel like that is the one session that really generates the highest amount of fatigue for the lowest return. So I may incorporate 2 brick sessions in a 12-week training cycle, but I really do try to stay away from brick sessions, particularly in older athletes. So yeah, there's a couple of things for you to use and implement into your training so that can really help you to recover better. I really find it's important as we get older that we have 1 day minimum a week where we do absolutely no training.
Yeah, Lindsay, and those brick sessions are interesting as well, because often I just see it with people that I train with is that if they are doing brick sessions, the run is just way too long for what that session's actually for. They're doing 10, 15K runs off the bike, which is silly, absolutely silly, because the amount of fatigue you're building there is ridiculous.
Exactly. And if you just want to get yourself used to the feeling of running on those legs you can do 3 to 5Ks. So you're absolutely right. So very short, like 10 to 15 minutes off of the bike is actually gives you everything you need from that brick session. More just pushes you into a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob, great question. I think what we're going to do, Jacob, to make you feel better too, thanks for submitting your question. We're going to send you a Coach Parry cap. So, thank you very much for submitting the question. You can, if you have a question you'd like answered, you can pop it through into the description. And then, Lindsay, this is such a great question. This is from Wendy Burden in Canada. Wendy saying, hi, everyone at Coach Parry. Thank you for your valuable insight. I'm a 58-year-old runner. I've been running for 5 years. Recently watched a TED Talk video where a cardiologist said that running marathons or any endurance over 2 hours isn't healthy. I have a spring marathon coming up and only do one once a year plus shorter distances, 4 races in all per season. I've also been really practicing the 80-20 method after I bought the book by Matt Fitzgerald. My question is marathons or are marathons really bad as the video suggests? I don't want to become paranoid that I'm damaging my heart. I was cleared medically before I started running. Thanks for your advice. You guys are awesome. Lindsay, should we be taking advice from cardiologists on YouTube?
I'm going to answer this with a story. Otherwise, our podcast is basically over because it's such a short answer. Okay. So in April 2024, I had an awful time at Boston and I had no idea what had gone wrong. My legs were in pain so early in the race. I was started in wave 1 and I got caught by wave 2, still with about 8 or 9 Ks to go. Anyway, I got back to South Africa and I was like, geez, I had been feeling off, like really tired, just wanted to sleep all the time. I just wasn't healthy. So I went for a full medical checkup. And as part of this medical checkup, I ended up at a cardiologist in his office. And I told him my story. And he just started going on and on about how bad marathon running was for you. And he's going to get in there and all my arteries are going to be clogged up with cholesterol. And, the problem is nothing but the marathon running. And he was going on and on at me about this marathon running, how bad it was for you. And I said to him, listen, if you carry on telling me how bad marathon running is for me, I'm going to have to bring my friend Kirsten in here to talk to you. And he stopped what he was saying and looked at me really weirdly, like, who is Kirsten? And I told him, Kirsten's my friend who I fly all over the world to meet. And that's our thing, is that we run marathons together. So anyway, he thought I was really strange just bringing that up. And so he said, come, let's go through to the office. And so he did. He started with my heart and he took photos of my heart and he was like, couldn't believe what he was seeing. He went down the hall to bring the other 2 cardiologists and their nurses in to show them my heart, because he said he'd never, ever seen a heart that's so close to the perfect pictures that they draw in the textbooks. And he said never in his 40 years of practicing had he ever seen 2 bicuspid valves. Those are the valves that open and close as the blood ejects from your heart. Never seen 2 such perfect bicuspid valves. And then he said, but this is probably why you've gotten away with it for so long, but I bet you when I go in there, I'm going to find all your arteries clogged up and all the rest of it. And so he went and he looked and he looked and he looked. And I knew that he was trying desperately to find just any evidence of plaque. And then after a while, he was like, I cannot find a speck of plaque anywhere on any of your arteries. And at that moment, his nurse walked back in. He'd done the perfect heart thing. And then literally she missed that little bit of him digging and said to him, Doc, have you given him the lecture about how marathon running is bad for you? And he said, I have, but it's starting to feel like he's the one who should be giving me the lecture. So really the problem here is that a lot of people who run marathons are extremely unhealthy, okay? So the lesson here, and trust me, I am no perfect student. I do tend to eat fairly healthy most of the time. I do tend to sleep fairly well most of the time, but I definitely drink too much alcohol and I eat way too many chocolates and I love a piece of fat on my meat. Okay. So I'm not anywhere near the perfect candidate, but I've never smoked. I don't drink consistently. I don't eat junk foods. Chocolate is junk food, but I don't make a habit of eating takeouts. I have takeouts like twice a year. So the point is that the people that are coming across these cardiologist desks that run marathons are also inherently unhealthy people. They would be unhealthy whether they ran marathons or not. And running per se is flippin' good for you. Okay. If it's done sensibly, done in the right way, done for the right reasons, it is good for you. It will keep you healthy.
Yeah, Lindsay, it's super interesting because a lot of these cardiologists don't see people in the population that are healthy. You go to a cardiologist when there is a problem, and
yeah.
So I mean, he might come across marathon runners and there is a problem, but that's not all marathon runners. So Wendy, I'm with Lindsay. And again, you've got to do what you love doing. If running marathons is what lights your fire and gets you like really fired up, then run marathons. Like, you could get hit by a bus tomorrow. Like, that's like, I'm not going to stop doing what I love because some cardiologist has seen 10 marathon runners who have got heart issues. Like, that's my feeling on it. But again, make sure you get checked out, and it's an individual thing. You've got to make the decision for you. But I'm with Lindsay.
Look, the one thing that I will say there is that people who tend to do endurance exercise full stop for the whole of their lives do tend to develop what is known as an enlarged heart, which actually only becomes a potential problem if you stop exercising. And I do not intend to stop exercising ever.
Brilliant. Great pod. Lindsay, thank you so much for your time. Don't forget, if you have a question you would like answered, just pop into the description of this podcast on whatever platform you're listening. If you're on the audio platforms, it's in the description. If you're on YouTube, it's in the description as well. Click on that, submit your question. We do filter the video questions to the top, and we'll be answering some more in an upcoming episode. And while you're at it, please make sure to leave us a review and a rating on whatever platform you listen to. It does help us get in front of other people who are also marathon maniacs. And looking forward to running marathons for many, 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 many more years to come. So from the two of us, until next time, it's cheers.